You know, I want to talk to you today like we're just hanging out, a couple of guitars sitting around the kitchen table swapping ideas. What I'm about to share with you, it's so deceptively simple, you'll probably hear it and think, wait, how did I miss that all these years? I'm going to talk about things that expert guitarists understand. Not because they're smarter or more talented, but because they've learned to see the guitar differently. And once you start seeing it that way, everything you already know will start to click. Your solos are going to sound intentional. Your phrasing is going to open up. And instead of guessing where to go next, the fretboard will just make sense. So grab your guitar, pull up a chair, and let's talk about what expert guitarists understand that most guitar players don't. Concept number one, expert players don't think in scales, they think in melodies. When they're improvising or even writing a solo, expert players aren't sitting there thinking, okay, this song's in A minor, so let me drop down to A minor pentatonic pattern number 1, just noodle around for a while. No, they're thinking about which notes are going to make up the best melodies. They're thinking about the most important notes in a scale, the juicy notes, as one of my favorite players likes to call them. And then the other supporting notes in a scale and how to best combine them to come up with great licks and phrases. They'll take a handful of notes, maybe just 2 or 3, and make them sing. Now, I'm going to say this more than once in this video. Do not misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not telling you that you shouldn't learn scales. Of course you have to do that. You've got to get your fingers moving and you've got to develop your fretboard knowledge, and learning scales is a big part of that. I've spent thousands of hours playing scales in my lifetime and I still do it all the time. But what expert players have done that's really different, they go way beyond memorizing some finger patterns. They see scales as tools that we can break apart to make melodies. We learn the scale inside and out. We learn to harmonize the scale in triads and seventh chords. For instance, a typical intermediate player is practicing the C major scale like this, while Eric Johnson, for example, hears this when you say C major scale. Advanced beginners and intermediates practice 2-octave C major patterns like this, while expert players sit around and make up scale patterns that sound like this. We're not just running patterns, we're teaching ourselves how to do something cool with the notes. Expert players have internalized what all the intervals from a scale sound like over the different chords from that key. Have you ever taken just one note from a scale and played it against all the chords in the key just to hear what it sounds like? To figure out if you like that sound and you can use it to make a powerful statement? For instance, I'm going to play a B note over 4 different chords: C major, A minor, D minor, and G. And not only is it going to sound different over each of those chords, but it's going to inspire me and make me hear melodies around that note in different ways. Check this out. Here's another really great way of creating melodies with smaller chunks of a scale, really learning what you can do with a few notes. We're going to be playing over a backing track with the chords E minor, C, G, and A minor. And we're going to be working with what I call 6-note cells on 2 strings. And we're going to apply the same formula, if you will, to each chord change. For instance, what if we play over E minor, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the root, and the 2nd and 3rd. We can do the same thing over C, over G, and over A minor. Let's start off just playing the 6 notes up and back like I just did to get the sound in our ears and the notes under our fingers. Okay, next, let's start making up some licks. Try to end your phrases on chord tones if possible, and it doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to experiment and see what you can do. Let me play over the chord changes a couple of times to give you some ideas. Here we go. You start coming up with good ideas with those 6 notes, we'll try another 6-note cell. How about playing the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and root over each chord? I really love the sound of these 6 notes and what you can do with them. You could do something as simple as play the 3rd, the 7th, the root, and the 5th over each chord. And that's just a fantastic little melody. Let me hit those chord changes again. Let's give it a rip. And that's what I mean by really knowing a scale. Not just memorizing patterns, but figuring out what you can do with those patterns. Internalizing all the sounds and possibilities of the scale so that you can make up melodies on the fly starting from pretty much anywhere. And when you can solo with lots of tasteful melodies, it's going to make it that much more impactful when you decide to show off and just rip through a scale. Remember, don't practice scales to learn patterns. Practice in a way that gives you the ability to use that scale in creative ways. Hey, do me a favor, if you're liking this video, please subscribe to the channel. Growth is what keeps me going, so I'd really appreciate it. A second big difference between expert players and lesser skilled players is in the way that they see the fretboard. Expert players see chord tones everywhere, not just scale patterns. Of course, we see scale patterns, but we also see the chord tones within those patterns. To an expert player, every note they play is connected to the song's harmony. We know that the chords we're playing over are what gives the single notes we play context and meaning. And we know which notes to play that sound best over certain types of chords. That's why expert players' solos always seem to just fit. It's because they're aiming for those chord tones. They're not just noodling around. They're going for maximum impact and emotion, always. So the easiest way to get good at targeting chord tones, you got to learn your triads. Triads to me are like this network of road signs or markers that are there to lead you home no matter where you are on the neck. Here's a great way to practice that lets you start out really simple and then build into some really nice playing. That backing track progression that we have today, it's E minor, C, G, and A minor. We're going to start getting used to targeting chord tones by just playing the root of each chord in time. We're going to play it on the 1 and hold it for a measure. So we play E, C, G, and then A, and then play it at a different spot on the neck. Playing it all over the neck like that, you're going to develop your fretboard knowledge organically, and we can even add a little phrasing like bending up into each note and giving each note some vibrato. You get comfortable with finding your root notes all over the place, then play the third and the root of each chord. Here's the third and root of E minor, C major, G major, A minor. Once you get comfortable finding roots and thirds, make a lick out of one by bending into the third from the second of each chord and then releasing that bend and going down to the root. We're in the key of G here, so over E minor, we would bend F sharp to G and release it to go to E. Over C, we're going to bend D into E, release it and play the C. Over G, we're going to bend A up into B, release it and play the G. And over A minor, we're going to bend that B note up into C, release it, and then hit that A note. Those are killer little phrases. And then lastly, we're going to incorporate the fifth, the last note of the triad, by playing the fifth into the root, and then the second, and bend it into the third. So over E minor, that's B, E, F sharp, bent to G. Over C, that would be G, C, D, bent up to E. Over G, we're going to play D, G, A, and bend it to B. And over A minor, we've got E, A, B, bent up into C. These little licks sound killer. Listen to this over the backing track. So bottom line, learn your triads. Start by learning to find the chord tones one by one everywhere on the neck. Then start making up licks with them. You can do so much just with the notes of the triad plus one or two other notes maybe for melody. And of course, the next step beyond triads is seventh arpeggios. Once again, we're going to start small and build up. We're going to start with one major and one minor arpeggio shape, and then we're going to move them around. So here's the shape for E minor 7, C major 7, G major 7, A minor 7. Okay, that's easy enough, right? Now, let's play the same notes, but make it a little more musical. Like over E minor, we're still going to play E, D, B, G, and E, but let's play the E by bending the D on the B string up to E. We can even hit that first E note a couple of times before playing through the rest of the arpeggio. And now we've turned a simple arpeggio shape into a lick. So see how we can take simple patterns and make them more musical. Let's hear that little theme over all four chords of the backing track. Okay, one more idea because I don't want this to feel overwhelming, but we're going to build things out and combine a seventh arpeggio shape with a triad lick over each chord. We're going to play a 5-string seventh arpeggio shape, one for major and one for minor. And then we're going to play the root, the fifth, and bend the second of each chord up into the third. So for E minor, we play this minor 7th arpeggio shape with the E root at the 7th fret of the A string. And when we get to that D or the minor 7th on the high E string, we're going to shift up to the 12th position. We're going to play E and B at the 12th fret, and then bend F sharp at the 14th fret up to G. And we'll use the same formula for each chord. For instance, here's C. Here's what that sounds like over our backing track. So what I'm trying to give you in this video is an idea of how better players became better. And it's not endless memorization and repetition of scale patterns along with a metronome. Better players get better because they almost immediately take techniques that they learn and they start trying to make music with them. They take a technique like a scale and they rip it apart. They learn it inside out by asking questions like, how does each note in this scale relate to the chords I'm going to be soloing over? What are the most important intervals? What are the other intervals that I can use to set up the really juicy notes? If I harmonize this scale into triads and 7th arpeggios, how can I turn those arpeggios into cool licks and melodic phrases? What melodies can I make up with a little fragment like a 6-note chunk over each chord in a chord change? And ultimately, how can I combine all of these elements into my own style? And then they practice like crazy to turn all these ideas into vocabulary that they can rely on when they improvise and solo. Give these concepts a try. Stop practicing scales like a robot and start thinking about each note in a scale and how it relates to chords. Quit making excuses and learn your triads all over the neck. Practice finding chord tones and turning a few key notes into musical statements. Once you start doing that, the guitar neck, it stops looking like a maze and it starts to look like, well, music. Please like the video, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next week with part 2 and more insights into how experts see the guitar. Thanks for watching.